I'm a French girl. I'm 25 years old, but I was 22 when it happened. I was living with my boyfriend, ex now, in a little flat in Paris. I was in a toxic and violent relationship. Moreover, I was suffering from a disease, so I couldn't go out with friends. So I spent most of my free time on the internet. I didn't have many friends. I was really lonely. As I couldn't go out, most of them abandoned me when I fell sick. The few friends that I had were living really far away. One day, I had a big argument with my boyfriend. I was really sad and lonely, so I decided to chat with random people on a website. I met a guy. We had the same interests. We were both playing video games a lot. We talked for 6 months every day. He was knowing that I was in a relationship, even if it was a terrible one. We'll call him Alex. We decided to meet in real life. He was okay to meet me at my flat. At first, we were both really shy, but thanks to alcohol, we talked and laughed together. I was so relieved that finally I was having a friend to talk with. We were seeing each other at least once per week. I remember this as a happy time. We had so many common points, and he never forced me to go out. He was really helping me, and I was helping him. He was a depressed guy. He was thinking that he was ruining his own life. I wanted to help him as much as I could to give him self-esteem. I just wanted him to spend good time with a good friend. And for my 22nd birthday, my boyfriend decided to make a party, and he invited Alex as he was my only friend that we were living not too far from my flat, and he invited 10 of his friends. I wasn't really happy with that. He knew that I didn't like when there's too many people. It tends to get me anxious and feel pressured. So I spent my entire night cooking and serving his friends. I really couldn't enjoy the party. And then my boyfriend humiliated me in front of everyone. I went to the bathroom to cry. Alex joined me and tried his best to comfort me, and I was in a pure mental breakdown, so I told him everything about my boyfriend's behavior. I insisted on the fact that I loved him, but I will break up when it will be the right time. It was too dangerous to break up at that moment. As I was crying, he tried to kiss me. I stopped him. I didn't want to add a new problem in my life. It was already too difficult. I know that it's weird to say, but I was feeling betrayed. I was feeling that he was waiting for this moment to try something. He didn't react, opened the door, and gave me a gift. It was a really beautiful necklace. I told him that I couldn't accept it. It was too expensive, but he went out without a word. After this, I decided to put some distance between us. I didn't want to make him suffer. It's cruel to keep him as a friend if he wants more. I explained to him that if he wanted more, it will not be with me. I didn't want to cheat on my boyfriend, but if one day he wanted to talk to a friend, then he could contact me. And I didn't hear from him after this. A few months later, I received texts from him. It was really long, something like 20 texts. He was saying that he was really in love with me, that he wanted to save me, that I was his reason to live. I was shocked at first, because the way he said it was really creepy. I explained to him one more time that I didn't need to be saved, that I was an adult, and even if my boyfriend was mean, I didn't want to break up. I wasn't feeling ready for this, and that I wasn't in love with him. We exchanged texts for more than 1 hour, but he didn't want to understand. Alex was insisting a lot. My boyfriend bugged as I was receiving too many texts and phone calls. It was making me too anxious. I decided to turn my phone off and went to work. At this moment, I was working in a little restaurant. I was a waitress there, and I was taking commands by phone. The phone was ringing. I picked up the phone. I heard breathing at first, then I recognized the voice. It was Alex's voice. I was feeling like I was in a horror movie. My bones froze. My entire body was shaking. I hung up almost immediately, but the phone rang again, something like 10 times until my boss picked it up. It was 7 p.m. I was supposed to finish my work at midnight. At 11 p.m., I saw him. He came to my workplace and begged to talk to me. I was so afraid I couldn't talk. I ran into the kitchen, explained the situation to one of my coworkers. He took my place as a waiter, and I took his as a cook. Alex left 30 minutes later. I was too afraid to come home alone, so my coworker dropped me off to my flat. My boyfriend was a night worker, so I was alone. I locked my flat's door, blocked Alex's number, and I was ready to call the police. I didn't want to talk about it to my boyfriend. I already knew that he wouldn't help me or that he would accuse me of being too provocative. Moreover, I didn't want him to fight with Alex. Alex to me was just lost. He didn't deserve to be beaten up by my boyfriend. The next day I had more than 100 blocked calls. I didn't sleep at all. I was exhausted. I was trying not to give him any attention. A month passed. He tried to come to my workplace many times, but my boss talked to him and called the cops. Then he never came back there. He was still harassing me, but I was ignoring it. I thought that he'll understand and finally leave me alone. I was afraid, so I tried to lodge a complaint with the police, but they refused it, as it was just a guy who's in love, so to speak. One day I woke up to go to work. My boyfriend was playing online video games, and he received a message. This was Alex. In the text he was saying that he was in love with me, that we had made love many times, that I was a cheater and stuff like that. I was shocked. I didn't understand what was happening. My brain froze and I couldn't react. But thank God my boyfriend saw my blocked call. He was suspecting that Alex was harassing me for a long time, even if I never told him. He decided to block him too, then he went to work. My boss called me, told me that I will begin 2 hours later today, and I was alone in my flat. I don't know how to explain it, but I was feeling that something would happen, and my heart was racing. I was feeling nauseous. Then I heard my doorbell ring. 1 time, 2 times, 3 times, 10 times. I couldn't stand or walk. My entire body was freezing up. I was feeling the tears on my face, but I couldn't react. I felt all of this was just some nightmare. I waited as silently as possible. As he was stalking me for a long time, he knew that I was supposed to work at this hour. I thought that he wanted to see my boyfriend, to manipulate him, as he wanted me to be single, and that was the best way. The doorbell rang again. I was supposed to go to work. It took all my courage, and I went out. It was him. He was crying. At this moment, I wasn't afraid anymore. I was so angry, and I began to shout at him. He was trying to explain that he was so in love with me. He would die if I didn't give him the chance. He said that he talked to my boyfriend, that he would finally save me, and that even if I don't want to be with him, my boyfriend would have to kill him so he wouldn't suffer anymore. Moreover, he admitted that he hacked my Facebook and Instagram account, so he knew that I wasn't hating him. I talked about the situation to my best friend. I was saying to her that Alex was just unstable, but not mean, that I was more sad than angry about his behavior and stuff like that. I decided to run out, but he followed me and grabbed my arms when I was trying to escape by the stairs. I hit him. I begged him to let me go. I cried like I'd never in my entire life. I felt terrorized, angry. I just wanted to escape and run as far as possible. He pushed me against the door and told me these words. "If you refuse to have a conversation with me, I'll go to your boyfriend's workplace. I'll talk to him. Then he'll hate you as much as I love you. Maybe he'd kill me, but that doesn't matter." I was trapped. I couldn't escape. I didn't want to call the cops as they didn't help me at first. I decided to accept to have a conversation with him outside after my work. He calmed down instantly, thanked me, and went out. When I arrived at work, I was still shaking. I explained everything to my coworker and boss. My coworker decided to stay in his car after work in front of the restaurant so that if I needed help, he would be there. At the end of my shift, Alex was here. We sat outside and talked. He was repeating what he'd said to me 1,000,000 times already, again and again. Then I interrupted him calmly and said that nothing will ever happen between us, that I was afraid of him and that he was poisoning my life. Moreover, he was putting me in danger. He stopped. It looked like he finally realized what he was doing. He pulled something out of his bag. It was a really big package, and he gave it to me. It was full of expensive items. I told him that I didn't want to accept it. At first he told me that he bought this for me so he couldn't keep it, as it would be a reminder of me. Then he kind of blackmailed me by saying that if I accepted this, he won't contact me ever again. I accepted. I was tired, and I just wanted to go home and finally sleep. Then he said goodbye and went out. Sadly, that's not the end of the story. 2 weeks later, I was sleeping at one of my coworkers' places, who became one of my most precious friends, and at 5 a.m. I heard my phone ringing. I was too tired to answer, but I heard it again, and again, and again. It was some text from an unknown number. I opened it, and the first thing I saw was blood. Then there was a long text, but I didn't have the time to read it as I received other pictures. There was blood everywhere in the pictures. I woke up my friend. I showed her the pictures, and I was shaking so much I couldn't understand what was happening. I received 31 pictures of mutilated arms, torsos, and legs. On the last of them, I saw Alex's face. It was Alex again. I called Alex's mother to explain her what was happening, and I recognized his bedroom in the pictures. Then my friend put my phone far from me. She was hugging me, and I was feeling so guilty, thinking that everything was my fault. Almost an hour later, I didn't receive another text or call, which was making me even more anxious. I thought that he was dead. Suddenly my phone rang again. I received a video of him, and he was in a hospital bed. He was trying to talk, but almost everything was unintelligible except for a few words like love and promises. Alex had tried to take his own life. He took drugs and cut himself. He was diagnosed as bipolar with a personality disorder. He stayed a few months at that psychiatric clinic. The last thing I heard about him was that he's on treatment and feeling better. I received a last text last year, and it was just, sorry. Since this day, I moved out. I have a new job, a new place to live, in a different city, and a different boyfriend. Even if I'm still traumatized by it, I do think that Alex isn't that bad of a guy. In France, psychiatric troubles are taken a little too lightly. Alex needed help, and I really hope from the bottom of my heart that he's gotten it. So I was living in Venice, California about a year ago. I lived in a 4-bedroom apartment with 3 other ladies, all of us in our mid to late 20s. The apartment setup is pretty complicated. Our apartment is a standalone building, and there are 2 other standalone apartments in front of ours, side by side. This forms a pretty private courtyard for our apartment, not accessible to the neighbors. My bedroom and my roommate Jesse's bedroom both have a large sliding glass door that opens onto the courtyard, and the front door of the apartment is accessed from the courtyard as well. In order to get into the courtyard, you have to open a spike-top locked gate, walk down a pathway between the 2 apartments in front of us, and open a locked door to the courtyard. The courtyard is enclosed by 12-foot cinder-block walls, and on the other side is the neighbor's gated narrow side yard and alleyway, and a few side yards between that. So basically the building is completely blocked in and very hard to access, and requires 3 different keys to gain access to the actual apartment. This isn't a great neighborhood, but we felt pretty safe when we moved in. About 2 months after we move in, it's 6 a.m. on a Sunday, and we're all home and in our rooms asleep. Jesse's boyfriend is asleep in bed with her, and I have a new guy over for the first time as well. Jessie has a 60-pound dog, and she leaves her sliding door partially open at night for the dog to go in and out. Keep in mind, we're inside 12-foot walls and are completely enclosed by other houses and apartment buildings, so those walls themselves aren't even accessible by anyone but our immediate neighbors. So leaving this door open does not seem risky at all. I mean, seriously, someone would have to be incredibly dedicated and have intimate knowledge of the layout of the place to pull off any sort of successful robbery, so leaving the door open felt safe. So it's 6 a.m. and Jessie's dog starts barking. She opens her eyes just in time to see through her sheer curtain the silhouette of a man drop inside the courtyard from the 12-foot wall. The dog bursts out of the door barking, and for some reason the guy shushes the dog, pushing him back inside and slides the door shut. Then he goes to the front door between Jesse's bedroom and mine and starts knocking. I'm about 50% awake at this point, and it slowly dawns on me that if someone is knocking on that door, they must have somehow bypassed the other 2 locked doors, and something is not right. Jessie is also about 50% awake, which causes her to assume that this is a person we know, so she opens the door for him. Note, this girl is literally a rocket scientist. She's not dumb, save your judgment. He pushes open the door and forces his way inside. She fully wakes up real fast and says, "Nope, I don't know you," and shoves him back out, locking the door. He goes back to our sliding door, which he knows is unlocked, and walks in. Jesse's boyfriend, Mike, in nothing but his whitey-tighties, flies out of bed and shoves him back out into the courtyard. Jesse runs in and shuts the sliding door, locking it by the really advanced method of laying a long piece of wood in the track because our insane landlady won't install real locks. The piece of wood isn't quite long enough, so the door can still be opened about 2 inches. So after securing that door as best as possible, she bursts into my bedroom, at which point I fully awaken. I'm naked in bed with an equally naked dude. She runs to my sliding door and locks it. This one actually works, and when she pulls back the curtain, I see Mike in the courtyard in a very physical fight with a guy I definitely do not know. Mike is a super non-violent data scientist nerdy type for the record, and he is fighting with a not very big but still bigger than Mike angry-looking dude. Mike is on the ground getting his face pummeled into the flagstone, and the dog is running around barking but otherwise being pretty unhelpful. Mike is trying to reason with the guy the whole time, saying, Hey, we don't want any of this. You can just leave. It'll be fine." And the guy stops just long enough for Mike to grab his arms, push him off, and jump up. Mike says, "Hey, here's the door. Just leave," and opens the door that leads from the courtyard out to the pathway towards the gate. The guy somehow manages to shove both Mike and the dog out that door and locks it behind them. So now the guy has barricaded himself in our courtyard, Mike and dog on one side, my now mostly clothed self, 3 other terrified girls, and one now mostly clothed guy still inside the apartment. There is one other way out of this apartment, and that is through the garage. Except it turns out our landlady is pretty incompetent with locks in general, so the garage door is brilliantly set up such that the lock is only accessible from the outside. Yeah, we're completely trapped inside this building, and the guy is working on Jesse's sliding door again. My other roommate, Emily, whose room is upstairs but facing the courtyard, has been on the phone with 911 the whole time. She's explaining the situation as best she can, and the 911 operator is telling her that since the guy is technically only in our yard, it's not a priority and we can't really do anything. He needs to be in the house to consider it an emergency. So the guy who was formerly naked takes the phone and very calmly says something to the effect of, "This man has bypassed 2 locked doors and scaled a 12-foot wall to access the location he is currently occupying. He has forced his way into the house twice. He has assaulted one person and has locked the assaultee out. He is currently attempting to access the house again through a door which has no lock and whose glass is thin enough to break, if you were to ask it nicely enough. We have no weapons and no way out. You need to get here as soon as possible." Fortunately, the police were already on their way because the neighbor had called them about a raving lunatic in whitey-tighties who was running around the street yelling for someone to call 911 and apparently now, for some reason, wielding a hockey stick. As we're watching the guy as best we can from the upstairs window, his behavior starts to change. He stops trying to open the door and begins pacing. He peeks around things. He looks behind him. It becomes apparent he's been running from something and is now bracing himself in case they catch up. Cops? Violent gangs with guns? We honestly have no idea, and that's actually super scary. At one point he disappears from the window's view, so I run up to the roof deck to see what he's doing. As I peer down, I'm startled to realize he's a lot closer to me than I expected because he's climbing a tree that shoots straight up to the roof deck. Note, I later tried climbing that same tree, and seriously the dude must have had superpowers. Totally sure of it. But then he decides he won't go all the way up. He'll just drop onto the roof of the little shed-type thing that houses the hot water heater. He lays on his stomach and peers around the corner, then sits back on his knees pulled up and starts kind of rocking. Oh. It's suddenly super obvious that this guy is out of his mind. This is later confirmed by Mike, who eventually retires his hockey stick and thankfully puts on pants, informing us that when he tried to offer the guy an exit through the open door, the guy replied, "No, there's danger behind that door." And that's when he shoved him and the dog out and presumably sacrificed them to whatever horrors lay in wait on the other side. After a short time of watching him switching between paranoid peeking and paranoid rocking, the cops finally show up. They calmly convince him to just come down, and they peacefully cuff him. No, really, it was actually pretty chill. The cops basically said they thought he was on something or multiple things, but probably mostly PCP. He had apparently been living with his aunt in a nearby apartment complex and must have been just as confused about how he got into our place as we were. From our rooftop deck, you could see where he had broken a wooden fence to get from a side yard into the neighbor's alley. You could also see the tiered wooden plant stand the neighbor had propped against the wall that the guy had scaled to get into our courtyard. And they eventually charged him with a few counts of assault, but couldn't charge him for trespassing because we didn't have any no trespassing signs.